All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the CX Chronicles Podcast. Super excited for today's show. Jeff Rosenblum, welcome to the CXC Podcast, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, guys, this is going to be a cool story. Couple things. Number one, Jeff has had a really interesting walk of life. He's got a super cool entrepreneurial story and journey for us that he's going to share with us today. And he's building a super cool company. His company, Questus, is a really forward-thinking digital marketing agency that's worked with some incredible companies across the world. And Jeff, I'll let you set the stage and tell the story, but super excited today to kind of hear your journey, hear your background, and hear how you and the team at Questus really got things moving as you built your business and scaled your business into the future. So, Jeff, why don't you take a couple minutes, man? Set the stage for the CX Nation. Give us the elevator pitch on you, my friend, and give us the high level for how you got into the world that you are in today and founding Questus.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the founding partner of the agency called Questus that you mentioned. I'm also clearly and far away the least valuable player on the team. We really built our agency. I think the differentiating value proposition is that we build advertising for the modern consumer journey. And what that means is so many brands and so many advertising agencies really focus in on just a slim part of the advertising journey. And they're just trying to interrupt people over and over and over again using TV ads or maybe stuff like YouTube pre-rolls. But if I'm really honest, what I think makes us different, what makes us better than the competition, it's just the team that we've built. We've really focused in on culture, and we've hired not just world-class advertisers and marketers, but world-class human beings. I work with some of the best people I've ever met in my life, and that's truly what brings value to our clients.
That's huge, man. I think it's so funny. Every one of these shows, it's so common that our guests start with team, man. It's the business that you can build, the products or the services that you can engineer or optimize or scale, all that fun stuff. They're made by people. They're made by the team of people that you can pull together into a room or into your office or into your working space, or nowadays on, even onto your digital office floor. And that team is honestly one of the most important things. So I think it's awesome that you got that. I call that right out of the gate. How did you, I'd love to kind of know, Jeff, how did you start, man? A lot of the listeners here, they're either leading teams or thinking about building their customer experience or customer success team. What did the Questus team look like? What did those first couple of years, or what did that beginning phase look like when you had to start pulling together some of these awesome people and start building this thing and start scaling this business and signing up these awesome brands that you guys are working with?
Yeah, great question. Let's talk about that. And we'll also talk about, we'll return to culture and how I learned that lesson the hard way, right? Because everything I've learned the hard way. So I think maybe that's powerful for your listeners. But, the backstory it's pretty unique, right? I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't go to Duke. I didn't go to a top school. I went to the University of Vermont, where
Catamounts.
Catamounts, great place, unbelievable place. Met my amazing, wonderful, beautiful wife there. Met my amazing, wonderful business partner there. And without exaggeration, I was the worst student on campus by far. Like, school just didn't work for me. I could take tests well, so I could always do okay on the report card and in SATs, which got me in, but I just couldn't sit still in class, right? So I graduated with something like a 2.8 GPA. Suffice it to say, there was not an army of major brands beating down my door to hire a kid who barely graduated college, right? So I got kind of lucky. I found myself in the right place at the right time, in the sense that I went out to California. I wanted to be a ski bum for a year in Tahoe. And the fortunate part of that is it put me on the doorstep of San Francisco. So when my girlfriend, who's now my wife, went to San Francisco, I followed her there, which was right at the epicenter of the internet revolution.
Yeah.
And, I predate the internet. I predate Monster and LinkedIn and all that. So when I was done being a ski bum, I opened up the yellow pages. I didn't even think to open up for advertising, where all the excitement and action is at. I opened M for marketing. And half your listeners don't even know what the yellow pages is. It's like a hard copy of Google, right? I had no idea what I was doing. And I literally called company after company every single day until I found one company that was willing to chat with me. And I went in and spoke to them, and they were doing incredible stuff. They had Levi Strauss and Disney and Discovery Channel, and they were doing all this great market research. And I begged for a job. I finally got a 3-month internship. I came up with one good idea. 3 months turned into a full-time job. And then one day they gave me a floppy disk, right? And they were like, hey, man, can you connect us to the internet, right? And it was AOL and CompUSA were on these floppy disks, or CompuServe. And I'm like, I honestly, dude, I don't think I was the one that actually connected us to the internet. I literally didn't have the attention span to get this thing to work. But once my boss stepped in and got this thing to work, I was like, wait a second, this is going to change the world, because we were a research company, which means my job was to collect data. And at that point, I had to figure out the balance between quality and quantity of data, which everybody wants, compared to the price of data. Data's expensive, right? Everyone you speak to, whether it's a survey or a qualitative interview, that costs money. At least it did back in the day. And I had a motorcycle, and I didn't have it because I was cool. I had a motorcycle because I was flat broke. But what's great is when you put on the helmet, I mean, this thing was like, it was used. The helmet was 3 sizes too big. I never licensed it. I never registered it. But when you put the helmet on, you get clarity of thought. There's no computer, no meeting. And I was like, look, if the entire world's going to be connected by the internet, doesn't that mean that everything I'm doing at this company run by a bunch of Harvard Business School guys, it's going to be disrupted overnight? And I went into the boss. I'm like, dude, like, everything is shifting to the internet. We need to pivot now. And he could not have been cooler. He's like, run with it, figure it out. And by 23, 24, crummy GPA, still a zit-faced kid, just finished working like at night cooking in restaurants. Next thing you know, I had Microsoft, Netscape, Sun Microsystems, Walt Disney, Levi Strauss. They're all my clients because I was one of the very few people in the world that was able to figure out how do we collect data via the internet. But what was interesting is none of them really said, hey, I just want data via the internet. They wanted to know, what are the implications for the internet? Now that we have all this data, what is the data telling us? And what we realized is everything about the advertising industry was going to be disrupted overnight. People are not only going to get away from TV and start shifting their time and attention to the internet, they're going to be less and less patient with friction in the consumer journey. They're going to be less and less patient with interruptions. They're going to be less and less likely to sit there complacently and watch TV ads, less and less likely to believe the stories that brands are telling. And, you know, ultimately, I just wanted to start an advertising agency. And my old college roommate, world-class designer, he had like art gallery openings. He had Johnny Depp was buying his paintings and all that. And like, he just didn't want to sit around in art galleries smoking cigarettes, hoping to be one of the lucky chosen few. So he started designing early iterations of broadband websites. And, you know, the story goes on that one day he sent me a link and he's like, dude, check out this website I built. And it was like the coolest thing I've ever seen. And it was a 3D model of a moon. And you run your mouse over the different craters and get different information. And he's showing me this. I'm like, dude, that thing is really cool, but who the hell wants to access information like this? This isn't user-friendly. It just looks cool. And he was like, all right, smart guy, show me what you're working. I showed him all my data. I showed him all my PowerPoint. And he's like, oh, my God, that's the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, yeah, but if we could take your cool shit and my boring shit, we might have something. And that's where we started. And, you know, I was like, let's start an advertising agency. And he's like, have you ever been in one? I'm like, no, have you? And he's like, no. And he's like, fuck it, let's go start an advertising agency. And that's what we started. We built a team of outsiders, a bunch of researchers, designers, geeks and whatnot. And, you know, within a decade, we won Agency of the Year. We won it again. We made a documentary. We wrote some books, and we're widely considered to be one of the top shops.
That's awesome, Jeff. I mean, number one, you guys have some awesome work. You know, some of the things that you will, number one, just the client list, Jeff, it speaks for itself, right? If you talk about some of the clients that you guys are working with, you're working with incredible world-known brands. Number two, the work itself is awesome, from everything from the photography to the web design to some of the, just the way that you're aesthetically showing some of these different stories and these different glimpses of what you're going to get and what you can expect with these brands you're working with. The work speaks for itself. So I think that's awesome. A couple of things I want to go back on. I love the fact that every one of our guests has a totally different story for how they kind of think about pulling together that initial team, that initial group of people that is going to make a huge thing happen. They don't know how, they don't know when, they don't know how the hell it's going to happen, but they know that they got this big ambitious goal and this big ambitious plan, or even just direction. They know they're going to start marching in a direction that's eventually going to land in some pretty dope spots. I love how, though, the one thing for our listeners that I want them to think about that Jeff just said here is like, the complementing skills part. When you talked about your friend there who had the cool stuff and you had the practical or the usable or the valuable stuff, and then you guys realized you could meld that stuff together, probably have a really valuable interesting, offering that other companies are going to want to learn more about how you can do it for them. I think that's super cool. But when you started talking about some of the other SMEs that you guys are super fortunate to have working at Questus today, what did that process look like, Jeff, in terms of I imagine you had to have already had a couple, you mentioned some huge names that you'd already started to put underneath your company's belt. What did the process look like when you had to start thinking about those other SMEs? You needed analysts, you needed designers, you needed engineers, you needed photographers, all this documentary specialists that can think about building these beautiful stories in film. What did that whole process look like? What did it look like to start finding these SMEs and bringing them into your business and working on your customer accounts?
Yeah, a great question. And, look, thank you for the kind words about, the work we're doing, the creative that you've seen out there. And it's not self-deprecating humor for me to say I am the least valuable player on the team. When you look at across our website and the other creative that you've seen, I actually don't do that stuff. Like, I don't have design skills. I don't have technology skills. I've got a little bit of strategy skills, but there's people that are a lot better than me. So I'm kind of lucky to be along for the ride. But I'll tell you how we got there, right? And, you should never trust an advertising person, right? And you sure as heck shouldn't trust a super young one, because it's an industry based upon image, and we're always going to say, hey, we're doing great. But for some reason, I've always been comfortable talking about like the moment where we weren't great, because I think that's what created the agency that we have today. So when I was talking about the story, and then I fast forwarded through where we won Agency of the Year and we won it again, we created a documentary. What happened was we started growing exponentially, right? Literally, we're a small agency. The way it works in this industry is there's a lot of really big agencies consisting of thousands of people, and then there's a bunch of agencies that are really small, consisting of a few dozen.
Yep.
There's not many in between. But we entered the Agency of the Year contest. We literally filled the form out wrong. So our little tiny shop was going against people with thousands and thousands of employees and decades of experience, and we beat them. We won. And then the next year, all right, let's fill out the form right. And we won again, right? And then we created a documentary. And our documentary was like, look, advertising is about to go through a complete and total revolution. Everything you've learned at your major corporation, everything you've learned at Harvard Business School is about to be totally disrupted. And we thought people were going to be like, what are you doing? It's sacrilege. You're beating down the industry. And we got standing ovations, and people loved us. So we started growing way too rapidly. And to be honest with you, we didn't know what we were doing, right? And what that meant was we were always wise enough to know that culture is extraordinarily important. We were always wise enough to know that it's probably the most important thing out there. But we weren't smart enough or experienced enough to know what that really means. So when things started getting busy, right, and people would be like, oh, we need to fix the culture. I'd be like, oh, I'll fix the culture, man. And I'd turn up the music, and I'd crank the Allman Brothers to 11, right? And we got the foosball table, and we got the ping pong table, and people are like, dude, we're stressed out. I'm like, let's go out drinking. And we go to the Russian Samovar in Midtown New York, and we party our faces off. And it was awesome, and people would love it, right? But within a day or two, the hangover wears off, and they're right back to, we need to fix our culture. So what I really learned is culture is about putting people in position to do their best work. Mm-hmm. Foosball tables, ping pong tables, Thursday night cocktails. That's all well and good. It's fun, but it's window dressing. It's the icing on the cake. At the core of it, it's about how do you put people in position to do their best work. And that really comes down to two things: talent acquisition and talent collaboration. What that means is, how do you pull in the best human beings possible? And then how do you get them to work together to increase their collective intelligence, right? How do you build synergies between these team members? And that's been a core focus for us, is really following the process for talent acquisition and talent collaboration.
I love it, Jeff. I think now more than ever, man, this is we've already entered this interesting stage, but what the pandemic showed the entire world is several things. It showed us a number of different things, but to your point of culture and the importance of culture and just the critical state of how every company, every business owner, every executive leadership team member today needs to be thinking, now more than ever, employee experience, employee engagement, employee retention, employee collaboration, promotion, right? Not just having all these things with the team, but to your point of giving people I'm going to show you a path for where you can go, how far you can go, how high you can go, whatever you want to call it, however you directionally try to make it sound. But the other piece too is this, man. People do their best work when they're put in an environment to be successful. And it's incredible how many super successful, massive companies out there, frankly, Jeff. And I know you guys have seen this too with some of your work, but they're not thinking about this. They're not investing in this. They're still making really very limited investments in employee engagement, employee culture, employee collaboration. As a CX nerd, Jeff, employee listening, man, that's so freaking easy. That's so easy, especially for companies that have 100, that are blessed enough to have 100,000 people that work for them. If you're not taking the time to think about what the opportunities or the future possibilities are from that audience, from that group of people, that's just a shame. It's a shame. But the other thing too is this: we're seeing this massive talent migration. So the smartest people on planet Earth, people that are probably doing an excellent job and working at companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, all these incredible companies out in the Bay Area and New York City, those people are in a different position now, man. Number one, they're being more sought after than they've ever been sought after ever before in the history of the world. And then number two, they're being sought after by employers and new future potential partners who are going to value their expertise, who are going to give them the ability to have accountability, responsibility, and authority within their given department or team that they're being asked to run and to come in and to lead and to scale. And I just think that that's going to be a huge game changer. I think that some of the best companies in the world, some of the companies that are going to be best positioned moving forward, they're going to be tripling and quadrupling down on this people part, because great employees are one of the most intricate pieces of magic sauce for awesome customer experiences and keeping people for the long haul and being able to have relationships with your clients that last decades long and just drive these lifetime values up into these astronomical places. So I love that you called that out early, man.
Yeah, I'll give you some examples of it, right? So who's got more data in this world than Google, right? This is a company that's got more data than we could ever possibly imagine or try to quantify. But they looked into this exact topic, which is how do you get peak performance, right? And they don't care what the answer is. They just want to know what the data says. And at the end of the day, when they put together a task force that looked through all the data, the number one determinant is, do people feel safe and protected, right? Are they in a safe zone? So let me give you 3 examples where that comes to life, right? So before I did get my first job, I was actually a cook at restaurants. And these are pretty critical moments in your life. I'm like 22 years old. You're working 18 hours a day. Like, those lessons really can change you at that critical juncture in your life.
Absolutely.
And there was this great head chef. His name was Henrik Cornelissen. Worked at this really, really world-class restaurant. And he would speak in French all the time. And the thing he would say was, showed. And he'd come down the hall, showed. Dude, nobody knew what the hell he was saying. It means hot in French, right? So one day he's walking down the hallway and he's got a pot and he's making caramel. Caramel is interesting because if you got a hot pot and you spill a hot pot of water on someone, obviously you're going to get burned. But the moment that hot water hits your skin, it's going to start cooling off. Caramel doesn't work that way. It's basically melted sugar, and it holds its temperature. So if it hits you, it's going to keep burning down. So he's walking, showed. And I stepped back, and one of the waitresses didn't know what was going on. She got in the way. They bumped into each other. A giant blob of this caramel goes flying through the air, and it lands on Hendrik's forearm. And a tiny, like you physically can't get a smaller drop of this, lands on the waitress's arm. It is the size of the tip of a pen. And it hits her, and it hurts. Like, I'm not taking anything away from her. I would not want that on me. And she's like, ow. And I can't remember if she's screaming or whatnot, but it hit her arm. And I watched Henrik put down the pot and attend to her, gently take her over, run her arm under cool water, and put a bandage on her. But the whole time I'm looking at Henrik's arm, and a giant blob, like 4 inches by 3 inches, is on his forearm, and it's melting through not just his skin and his flesh. I'm watching it bubble, all erupt around the edges. And he completely ignored his own personal needs to take care of the needs of the waitress, where you could quantify her injury was probably 1/100th what he was going through. And that was one of the most impactful. Like, I've worked with some of the biggest and the best executives in the world, but that was probably the most important learning experience for me, is how do you keep the team safe? How do you make sure they understand that they're number one? But I'll give you 2 other examples real quick. I went to a meeting once, high-tech company. What's great about working in research or an advertising agency is eventually you get to walk through almost the front door of almost every company in the world. I've walked through literally dozens and dozens of household names. And This was a really big company, and I walk in, and there's like 15 people there. I introduce myself to everyone, including the main person. I'm like, hey, I'm Jeff. Nice to meet you. And he literally screams at me. He's like, last name? I'm like, excuse me? He's like, last name. I'm like, Rosenblum. He's like, when you introduce yourself to someone, you introduce your last name. I'm like, dude, I'm like a 30-year-old adult. I know how to introduce myself.
Oh,
I don't do
man.
the last name bit. And who the F are you to start yelling at me?
Yeah.
So then I start presenting, and it continued. And I'm just looking at the 19 other people in the room, and they just look so sad. Like they were looking at me like, help, help, get me out. Like, in
Freak me out.
the epilogue on the story is that company was Earthlink. For your younger listeners, excuse me, your older listeners, they'd be like, holy shit, what happened to Earthlink?
Yeah,
Your
right,
younger
right.
listeners, they never heard of Earthlink.
They've never heard of
Earthlink
it.
was supposed to be Google. Earthlink was a giant company, but their culture was so screwed up that they're basically dead. Their market cap is just a fraction of what it once was. Nobody knows about them. Nobody cares about them. And, I don't think it was because of that one jerk, but I think it was emblematic of their culture.
Yep.
But I'll give you another example just to flesh them all out, because I can't stop studying these things. I remember going to Wyndham, a client of ours, and being in in an area of their headquarters where all their top executives are. And one of the folks over there, he saw me like, can I help you? And I'm like, yeah, man, do you know where the restroom is? He's like, sure. And he got up from his desk and he walked me down the hall. We made a hard right turn, walked down there, made another hard right turn, walked me all the way to the bathroom. Just took care of me as if I was a guest at the Ritz-Carlton.
Yep.
And then he left, obviously, and went back to his desk. But he was like a top executive, and I was a nobody. He knew I didn't work there. He knew I wasn't. And that type of culture leads to the performance that you see over there. Like their stock performance is great. They've been able to survive COVID. They put out great marketing. They own great brands. They're progressing every single day. And all three of those really come down to how do you make sure that people feel safe and respected.
Yep, 100%, man. I think that's awesome examples, Jeff. And the other thing too is one of the big things that I just heard there is it almost doesn't matter whether you're talking about your internal team and the employees that are working and showing up every single solitary day to help you run your business, grow your business, scale your business, or your customers, right? And there's this constant debate around, you don't have a business without customers. You don't have revenue without customers. You can't have employees if you don't have revenue. Totally get it. But like, you're right. Some of the best companies in the world, they just treat their CX and their EX measures almost identical. They're both two of the biggest priorities. They both lead to increased revenues. They both lead to increased financial performance. And then they both lead to building and going back and pinning up the awesome points you made here, Jeff. They both go to building a culture and a place where both customers and employees, they already know that they're going to be able to do incredible work. They're going to be supported. They're going to be taken care of. There's going to be empathy. There's going to be all this involvement in this. And look, for our listeners, that's one of the biggest things that we're trying to do, especially for the folks that are trying to grow their business, grow their brand, grow their service, grow their team, right? These are things that you got to be thinking about. Don't take them at face value. Think about how you can start acting on them right now. Jeff, awesome ideas here on the team, man. Really like these ones. Let's jump into the second CX pillar of tools. As you and the team at Questus started to really kind of ratchet up the action, you had more things going on. You had more mediums that you were serving deliverables back to your clients for. I have to imagine tools and technology was a huge part of that. Can you take a couple minutes to kind of walk us through how you and the original team at Questus had to think about leveraging tools, leveraging technology, leveraging some of the different mediums that people want to advertise and market and really be exposing their brands to? Love to hear kind of how you guys thought about the whole toolkit evolution at Questus.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because as a digital agency, we were very focused on technology for our clients, building, complex apps, complex websites. Honestly, man, we learned over time, we don't really love that side of the business. We're much more focused in on the front end, right? What is the story that we're telling on behalf of our clients, right? So even a website, like we work on some pretty complex websites, but if it gets really complex, like enterprise level, we don't even do the back end. We just do the front end. And that was a hard decision for us because we thought as a digital agency, technology would be critical. But what we realized is it's not. Like for myself and my business partner, Jordan, neither of us are true tech guys. So we don't understand the language. We don't understand the technology. And we're not that passionate about it. We thought we had to have it. And we were so scared for so long to say, we don't want to have this in-house. Let's spin it out. Let's let folks on the team start their own business. We'll outsource to them. It turned out to be one of the smartest things we've ever done. I think the lesson is, it's a lot better to be narrow with your skill set in regard to something that you love, you're passionate about, you can manage intrinsically, as opposed to trying to force something in there that may not be authentic to your business and authentic to your leadership. So that might be a little bit different than when you're expecting, because for us, tools and technology were not that critical. Now, fast forward, say a decade from that moment, tools and technology are hyper important for us right now, because we're unlike the previous time where we started growing exponentially and we didn't understand how to really take advantage of it. Now, that hurt at that moment. Like, I mean, dude, blood, sweat, snot, tears, you name it, man. You take your business and your baby and people on the team that you love, and at 1 minute you're the best agency in the universe, and the next minute you drive it into a wall. Like, you learn a lot. And I would say the culture and the team that we talked about is far and away the most important thing we learned. But if part of that is talent acquisition and talent collaboration, now we're very focused in on what are the processes and what are the tools for that. So we've got a very high-end cloud-based tool that's able to track everything we do. We've got some world-class folks, Debbie Dumont, who's the managing director, Alice Winston, who's our controller, who work really hard on using these tools to get everybody the metrics that they need, right? Clients have very specific needs. They want more, they want faster, they've got budgets. So how do we find the optimal way to perform, get them the best deliverables for the lowest price at the fastest turnaround time, right? So the way we do it is by trying to access data and get everybody the information they need. If I'm honest about it, we're a little early in the journey. Like, I think we've got more and better data than ever before, but it might take us another year or two to get down to the granularity that we're really looking for. Because every time we peel off a layer of the onion, we're like, holy shit, we just learned so much more. How about this next question? How about this next question? So it really comes down to the culture and those team members to use those tools.
Love it, man. You're absolutely right. And the other thing too, I love that you some of the awesome teammates on your team at Questus, people bring, as you just said, they bring the tools, they bring the processes, and they bring some of the playbooks that are going to kind of lead you to that point, Jeff, right? The reality is that once you get to the point where your business is in the place of its evolution, where you can actually afford and have awesome people come in, and they've done this at other companies, they've done it in the past, they've got experience, they know their space, they're already going to know the top 10 tools that fall within their specific team, department, or ownership of the business. They're definitely going to already have their own playbook for what's worked extremely well, what hasn't worked well. Directionally, they're already going to have a really good sense for where they want to bring the team, or what they want their first year, 5 years, whatever the plan looks like, or however you're doing your prioritization. But I think that's spot on, man. Super great way of thinking about it. I also think there's one other thing that you just said that I think is super important. And frankly, I don't hear enough guests saying this, but when you're growing these businesses and you're scaling these startups and some of these growth focused companies, Jeff, you just laid an awesome nugget of truth and wisdom out there, which is you also got to know when to say no. You do need to know when to say no, and you do need to be able to have the confidence and the ability to. Sometimes there aren't perfect deals and there aren't perfect opportunities. It can be really hard because when you're growing, you want to take every nickel of revenue, every dime of revenue. You were trying to grow. You're trying to get another badge, another logo. You know that if you bring that customer on, you can add to the team. All that stuff. I get it. But you also got to make sure that you're building and rowing the boat in the type of direction that's actually going to have a sustainable future for you. And that's going to make sense. And it's really going to be a sensible way that you build your brand and build your business and build your team. And sometimes by saying yes to everything or saying yes to too much, you can get yourself into trouble. You can run out of resources. You can do a really shitty job on something that you should have said no to, but you said yes to. Now you have a customer that's pissed and they're not a promoter, rather they're a detractor and they're not thrilled. So I think that's an awesome piece of advice to kind of give to our listeners today. Jeff, I want to jump into the third CX pillar of process, because you already started to bring us there. What about the process side? So as you and the team at Questus was building and the customer portfolio was getting bigger, and I also imagine the pressure and the expectations as those logos and badges got bigger, they probably got a little bit more hard on you and the team. But how did you guys leverage processes, and what type of playbooks or what type of operating procedures did you and the team kind of put into play to manage that growth, keep that high quality service and deliverables, and really continue to attract more and more future customers that wanted to work with the Questus team?
Yeah, that's a great question because, if one of the core points that we're making today is culture is critically important, process enables culture.
Yep.
And people don't want to talk about process because it's not that fun, it's not that exciting. But, when people want to have a strong work-life balance, when they want to put out work that's better than they've ever thought possible, that's better than what anybody else is doing in the industry, process enables that.
Yep.
So for us, we're really on a journey to get better and better in regard to documenting and following our processes. So I'll give you an example, which is, what you just brought up is the ability to say no. Well, that's hard, man. I mean,
Yeah.
almost any skill is hard to come by. Certainly for entrepreneurs, learning to say no is almost impossible because if you're an entrepreneur, you're an optimist, right? You saw an opportunity, you're like, I don't care. Like for us, me and Jordan, we had never stepped foot in an advertising agency and we started one. So we're always going to see the upside of maybe somebody we're hiring or a new client that wants to work with us. So I've had to learn to say no to opportunities. Had to learn how to say no to potential new hires. But the truth of the matter is, like, I know I'm never going to be great at it. So we've got processes to help figure it out. We've got a fit assessment for new clients. I was on a client the other day, seemed super exciting, big budget, but there's these little red flags where you're like, this isn't right. We've been doing this for a couple decades. We know that one little red flag is an indicator of a significant problem to come, right? So it all comes together with culture and process. So with hiring, for example, I'm a people person. I'm an optimist. So there's always that little voice on my shoulder that says, this person is not a good fit. I shouldn't hire this person. But I'm great at tamping down that voice because I'm like, that person's pretty cool. And we tell some cool college stories. And he or she made me laugh, or they did this cool thing at work. And I can get really optimistic and see the upside. So what I've learned is you have to have a process. And many times the process is having people that are much better than you at it. Debbie Dumont, who I mentioned earlier, our managing director, she's world-class at hiring. She's just, when those red flags come up, she listens to them, right? And she knows and she follows a process. And now we've got someone who's running all of our recruiting and we're trying to build those processes. And 6 months later, we're going to improve those processes. And 6 months later, we're going to improve those processes. And 3 months after that, they're going to get slightly worse because people get away from process, right? So having good management is about getting those processes in place, optimizing them, and making sure we're adhering to them. And for us, that's a critical part of our journey. I wouldn't say it's been a critical part of our journey to date, but I know as we think about getting to the next level, doubling and tripling in size, process will be critical.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely agree. I think that so all awesome points of advice there, Jeff. And the last part, so spot on, which is if you don't think the process or the playbook or the SOP or the mapping or the general expectation documentation and curation that Jeff's talking about is important now because you're still scaling, you're building the bonfire, you're figuring out what those initial ideal customer profiles even look like so that you can go find out how to bring on 10 times more of those things. Wait until your team is double or triple the size. Wait until your revenue is double or triple the size. Obviously, double or triple the amount of problems, if not even more, Jeff. Right? Once all those things start to happen, that is when process it's essential. It's mandatory. I would also argue for some of the best led and managed companies in the world, they get to that sweet spot where process becomes everything. Process becomes key. Obviously, you lose some of the sexiness of building and having the creative and artistic part of like the beginning stages of a business. And that's fun to kind of live in a world where there isn't processes and you can ebb and flow and you're just constantly ripping curveballs and you get good at hitting curveballs. But when you get a team to a certain size and you get your customer portfolio to a certain size, that's what leads to consistency. Consistency is what leads to expected results. Expected results equals a higher value for whatever your product or your service or your will or your wares that you're pitching and selling. And that becomes a bit more important. And then lastly, going back to what we talked about, spent some time talking about with the employee engagement side, people want direction and people want to know what they can expect. And once your company starts getting big and the internal team and employee base starts getting huge, you got to have that process to keep people understanding what to expect, what's good, what's bad, how are we going to win, how are we going to lose, what's expected of your role, what's expected in these different teams and departments. That's where it becomes really, really critical. This is awesome, Jeff. I want to jump into the fourth and the final CX pillar of feedback because I'm excited to hear some of the things that you guys have kind of done as you've built and scaled Questus out. But I'd love to hear how you guys have sort of leveraged some of your customer feedback over the years to grow the business and to grow the portfolio. And then I'd love for you to take a couple minutes to talk about the employee side too. You've mentioned a bunch of your awesome all-star teammates. I'd love to hear how you kind of think about leveraging and using your customer and your employee feedback to grow the business and to get to where you guys are today.
Yeah, I mean, it's good timing, right? As we record this, it's December, it's year end. So we're going through the appraisal process. So for every team member, we ask other people to give input. It's not a survey. It's not a bunch of closed-ended questions. We've boiled it down to really two key questions. What do we want people to continue to do? And what do we want people to start doing, right? All of that is in the positive vernacular, right? What are you doing well? And not what are you doing poorly, but hey, here's some things that you can start doing to overcome that, right?
Yep.
So there's a bit of a formal process there. We'll run a series of one-on-ones, and we'll do a series of mini focus groups and a survey with our team members to ask them, what can we change? What can we improve? We'll narrow that down to the two critical things, which is one, culture, and two, the quality of work. And then ultimately, every year we roll out our strategic plan. And then every quarter we share that information with everybody, right? So we try our best to share all of our financial performance. We try our best to share where we've succeeded, and probably more importantly, where we've fallen down, right? So we've tried to build a process around that. Frankly, sometimes we get away from it. I think we're really committed to it right now. That's part of getting to a certain size when you can have a great managing director who manages operations, because I'm not an operational person. So I'll be like, hey, we need to put all these tools in place. We need these processes in place. We need this presentation in place. We need to do it quarterly. And then it's like 3 quarters later and like, dude, I thought we were doing this every quarter. Like, shit, I got distracted, right? So now we've got this great managing director who keeps us on point to make sure we're sharing all that information. And then on the customer side, it depends on the actual client. Some want a formal review every year. Someone want it every 3 months or every 6 months. But frankly, if you hire great team members, which we have, and you've got a leadership team that's really committed to communication, that becomes sort of an ongoing feedback loop. I don't need to formalize too much of my feedback with clients. We do a little formal every year for the most part, but we just stay in close contact with them. They know late at night, Saturday or Sunday, anything that's on their mind, they can text us. We know when things are going well. And frankly, we're not looking for those negative data points. Like I get emails from clients all the time. I mean, all the time. Like, we love your team. Jeff, I hope you understand what an incredible team you have. I just got one from Morgan's client. She's, born and raised in her career over at Questus, multiple promotions, and she's just killing it. And the data I get is, clients like, dude, I love Morgan. I love the work. I love this presentation that she just put on with Emily. Emily's killing it. She's getting promotions, right? So, I don't think I need too much formal feedback when I'm regularly getting that positive feedback from folks. And I'm never shy about asking them, what can we change? What can we improve? I know we're doing well. You told us we're doing well. What can we do better?
Yeah, I love it, Jeff. I think that's awesome. And it's definitely guarantee it's been a big part of what's fueled Questus' success. It's fueled the ability for you and the team to keep growing, keep finding these awesome new customers to work with. I think that, in short, man, I know that for the listeners, they have to listen to me talk about this every single solitary week. And some of the customers that we're working with at CX Chronicles, same exact thing. But customer feedback and employee feedback is fuel for growth. If it's used correctly, and if you understand how to collect it, how to pull it all together, aggregate it into one spot where you can then break it down, compartmentalize it, understand the different features, the good, the bad, the ugly, what's working, what sucks, where are we killing it, where are we not killing it. But then most importantly, you just heard Jeff say this, guys, and this is what so many are going to say, then you got to go act on the damn stuff. Because if you don't do that, a lot of CX and CS folks and customer focused businesses would argue, why even doing it? Because the acting part, just like anything in life, frankly, but the acting part is where you're going to get the change, whether it's positive change or whether it's neutral change or whether it's negative change. And acting is the first step. And you got to take that first step in acting on it. Last thing is this, and tying it all together, frankly, Jeff, is when you've got incredible teammates and you've got an awesome world-class group of SMEs that are owning their specific parts of the business, and they've got that extra fuel and they've got that extra information from both customers and their teammates, guess who can do their jobs 10 times better? They have additional control guards or direction sets, if you will, from customers and from fellow teammates. And it can help them prioritize. It can help them focus, and it can help them really kind of double down on what's going to make the biggest impact for their team or their specific role in the business. So I love it. Jeff, this has been absolutely fantastic, my friend. Before we wrap up, I want to make sure, tell the CX Nation where they can find out more about you, sir, and tell the CX Nation where they can learn more about the incredible work that you guys are doing over at Questus.
Yeah, I'd say the easiest way to follow us is to go to our website, questus.com, QUESTUS.com. You can follow us on social like Insta and LinkedIn at Questus Agency. I got a new book coming out in January. It's called Exponential. It'll be up on Amazon. And if you want to find me, I'm at the Jeff Rosenblum on Instagram.
Fantastic, Jeff. That's awesome. Congrats on the book, sir, too. That's awesome. Make sure that we'll get we'll drop that in the update so folks know exactly where to find Jeff's new book and where they can learn about the awesome things you guys are doing. But it's been our absolute pleasure, man. I'm pumped that we're connected now. I look forward to seeing what you and the team at Quest is doing moving forward. And thank you so much for coming on and being a part of the CX Chronicles podcast.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. Thanks, man.